Israeli Minister Benny Gantz has resigned from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's emergency government. Gantz's resignation is a direct result of Netanyahu prioritizing political considerations, some say, over strategic decisions. That action follows an Israeli Defense Force raid on a refugee camp in Gaza over the weekend to rescue 4 Israeli hostages who were kidnapped last year. During that raid, more than 270 people, including women and children, were killed. Let's continue getting reaction to the story. Bring in our correspondent in Tel Aviv, Sarah Coates, who joins us now live from that city. Lovely to see you as always, Sarah. Thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Gantz mentioning that he's leaving with a heavy heart, but with his heart still intact, he says. There's already commentary around these being signs of deepening divisions within this emergency government. How are things being read on your side of the border?
Good morning. Deepening divisions, you are entirely right. What this is really showing now is just how deeply divided Israel is politically, and we do need to also remember that this is a time today that the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken will be landing here in Israel for his 8th wartime visit, coming into a starkly different political landscape. Benny Gantz was, of course, seen as a more moderate voice, a centrist figure, something that the United States and other allies around the region would feel more comfortable speaking to. But in his absence, he now leaves a gap for much more hawkish voices, far-right voices, such as the the National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, and also the Finance Minister, Bezalel Smotrich. Now, these two men have been really causing a lot of division around the country on the ground. They're being seen as two voices who've been blocking a potential ceasefire and hostage release deal. And it was just a few minutes ago, actually, that Bezalel Smotrich was speaking to a number of family members of these more than 100 Israeli hostages that are being held still in the Gaza Strip. And he said to them, we will not accept any deal that is, quote, collective suicide. So certainly a very difficult job for Antony Blinken when he lands here in Israel a little later today. And 2 key goals of his is really, one of them pushing for an end to the war, and secondly, trying to stop this war spreading even further.
Yeah, and it seems at the heart of, let me put it this way, it seems the straw that broke the camel's back for Benny Gantz is this idea of there not being a post-conflict plan. I mean, what happens after you've so-called eradicated Hamas in Gaza? How do you move forward?
Well, that remains to be seen, and this is the same thing that we've really been hearing from the international community. There has been a lot of criticism levelled at Israel over what is perceived as a lack of a plan in Gaza. So certainly very concerning, this change, as you mentioned, in the political landscape. And we really just need to look at what's happening here on the Israeli street. There have been demonstrations day after day. They've been intensifying. And people want to see an end to this war. We also do need to remember that we're not just talking about Gaza here, we're also talking about an extremely dire situation in northern Israel on the border there with Lebanon. 60,000 people from those communities, they remain internally displaced. They are unable to go home given the security situation in the north, and there is a lot of concern that without a ceasefire coming into play very, very soon, that this could become the next front, and this could then in turn develop into a larger scale regional war, potentially drawing in Iran.
Absolutely. It shouldn't be lost to us, of course. Gantz is seen as, one of Benjamin Netanyahu's main political rivals. As part of his exiting this emergency government, he called for an election date to be set. How much momentum do you reckon that call is likely to receive in the context of those protests you spoke about?
Well, it certainly won't have too much when you look at the numbers. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, and his governing coalition, they have 64 seats, a majority in the 120-seat Israeli Knesset. This is the parliament. So certainly numbers-wise, it doesn't have an impact. And we also do need to remember the recent polls that have been published a week or so ago. For the first time since October, Benjamin Netanyahu is actually polling higher than Benny Gantz, who, as you mentioned, is his fiercest political rival. But once again, this just really lays bare the deep divisions being seen here in Israel right now. And with this far-right element potentially given more room to move in this coalition, it could further isolate Israel from the international community. So certainly a lot of concern here on the ground over Gantz's departure.
Yeah, And do you reckon Benjamin Netanyahu is feeling any pressure from all of this? I mean, you spoke about Anthony Blinken's imminent arrival, the deepening signs of, or the signs of deepening divisions within this emergency government, in a context where it did feel like there was an increasing isolating effect on Netanyahu's decisions around the war in Gaza. What's your reading around his disposition? I know he, for example, took to X after Gantz had resigned, saying something along the lines of, this is the time to unite forces and not a time to quit.
That's right. He is calling on Gantz to reconsider. He said, Benny, this is not the time to abandon the campaign. This is the time to join forces. But certainly, as you mentioned, once again, a lot of concern over what will happen now. We do understand, according to the Prime Minister's office, that he's now looking at dissolving this emergency war cabinet because on top of Gantz's departure, also Gadi Eisenkot, he played an observer role in this very limited war cabinet. So certainly, as I said, it leaves more room for these more hawkish elements of the coalition to come in to sort of shape the way the war goes forward from now. And it is a very, very difficult position for the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, his 8th wartime visit coming in at a very uncertain time here. And once again, two main goals: trying to end this war, bring back the remaining hostages, and of course, stop this war spreading even further.